$100 million funding announcements, the shadow of the looming AI bubble, and debates surrounding agentic AI. This week's Cerebral Valley AI Summit just concluded, which, for the uninitiated, is Newcomer's flagship event, hosted by myself, Eric Newcomer, and Volley co-founders Max Child and James Wilsterman, that brings together the top founders and investors and features cutting-edge discussions with the biggest names in AI. In this episode of the podcast, we're revisiting two of those important discussions, starting with the conversation I had with Anthropic's Chief Product Officer, Mike Krieger. During the conversation, we discussed the evolution of AI product design with an emphasis on the need for truth-seeking models. Mike also shared his thoughts on what Anthropic can do to combat AI slop and how they plan to focus on growth opportunities in life sciences and specialized verticals. This is the Newcomer Podcast. All right, lean in, everybody. Excited about this one. Mike, thanks so much for joining me.
Great to be here.
You know, co-founder of Instagram to Chief Product Officer at Anthropic. I wanted to start with almost like a philosophical question that spans those two companies. You know, we talk about AI now, but obviously social media companies with feeds were using machine learning and systems to surface content. Then that era seems like it was about engagement. And it was like, okay, we're going to blame, or the humans will be responsible for the truth value of what they have to say. And we're going to see what content people are interested in. And those humans can say what they want to say. You know, as a journalist and someone who's interested in like the truth and chasing the truth, one thing I've liked about models, despite like all the like, oh, they hallucinate or whatever, is the aspiration is like we are judged based on how accurate our responses are. You compete on leaderboards that are saying, how often are you getting things right? You want to pass, you know, math Olympiad type tests. Do you accept that framework? And how much do you sort of in this role see Anthropic as this sort of like truth-seeking organization, or will engagement seep back in?
That's a really good question. Hi, everybody. Good to be here.
I started with a heavy.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different directions you take this. I'll try to be succinct. I think there are places where we're training the models as an industry to be good conversationalists. And sometimes that actually looks like continuing the conversation. I got a reach out from somebody that was like, hey, are you guys trying to optimize for engagement? Because Claude will often ask me a follow-up question like, well, did you want to talk about this? And the funny part is like, not at all. And like time span is like, I can tell you, like not on any of the dashboards that I ever look at. It's just not a main consideration. But just training Claude to like, keep the conversation going, being a good conversation. So we might actually need some interesting sort of counter metrics to what, you know, well, can you get the same conversation done or accomplished with less of a conversation? I do think there are some really interesting sort of other phenomena happening in the industry. So one of the things that we try hard not to optimize for, I just don't think it's like the right incentive, but is like these like chatbot leaderboards like Ella Marine and all these places. I think they're useful sort of yardsticks of how we're doing, but they're not like the thing that you should optimize for. But we have found, like, as you like look at what ends up doing well on there, it's like verbosity, like being like more long-winded can actually be praised by like the raters on the.
That's like taking an exam. It's like every note you remember, like unload it into it. Yeah.
And so it is interesting, like I think the evals are important, but whenever we sort of like have these public yardsticks, it can tend towards the like yappier or more engagement-y sort of thing. So I think that's one vertical. The other thing that I think about though is, you know, primarily what we're doing is building AI for businesses, right? And so we have like Cloud for Enterprise, and in some, like, you know, it's not like we would do like super engagement baity type things, but you know, a year later after a contract gets signed, people are going to look and say like, did people use our AI or not? And part of that is just, did it solve the problem? Was it truth seeking? Did it like do the right things? But then there's also like, was it a product I liked using? And so I think we're all navigating this question of like, you know, how do we train the models? How do we design the products around the models? And like, how do they get delivered in a way that is maximally useful rather than falling into this like engagement for engagements?
What do you make of this word slop? Like, I feel like that, if you had to sum up the criticism of AI from, I don't know, the skeptics, like that's a word that often comes to mind. Like, what do you make of slop, and what's to be learned from that sort of accusation?
Yeah, I've like told our product team, like one of our goals when we do things like build like PowerPoint decks and Excel files and Word documents is to be like the anti-slop. And I think like the way I think about it, it's like hard to put that on an eval, right? Like 80% slop or 70% slop. I think it looks like a couple of things. Like one is, does it look super low effort? Like, did it just like, does it not reflect any sort of critical thinking that the human did alongside the AI? And you can often tell, you're like, was this thought through? Like, this wasn't really edited. Like, is this 2,000 words when 200 would have done if it had actually been edited down? So I think there's that strong component. And I went to a talk by Ted Chiang, who's a science fiction writer. He wrote the short story that became Arrival. He's one of my favorite writers. And we were having this conversation about AI and can AI be creative? And he made the point of creativity is the product of a lot of decisions, right? And so that's true for novels. Like what does slop look like for a novel? It's like when you're like, well, like this just seems like the kind of base level output if you're just like, tell me a story,
right?
You know? But I think that it applies just to nonfiction as well, right? Like if the document that you put in, like even product reviews, if somebody comes in, this happens rarely, thankfully in Anthropic, but like with a product requirements doc that looks like it was just the first output from just like, write me a PRD for this feature, like this is just slop, right? So I think that's the content piece. Then there's the design and the quality piece, so which maybe is like a version of what that other one is, but it's more visual, right?
Is time like the solution? Like if I think about writing as a human, I go back and revision is often where you find great writing. Is that the case with AI where it's like, okay, if you have more time, the answers will be more tight? Or how do you see the relationship between time and the quality of the answer?
I think it's levels of engagement and sort of how many iterations that you've gone through and how many, and actually you could imagine here's a very well-constructed prompt where I have already pre-made a bunch of the decisions. I had you can like see what Claude is thinking, you can expand a little, like I rarely do it because it's doing its thinking. I mostly want the answer. But I expanded it yesterday and I had written like a pretty long prompt and in its thinking, it was like, Mike has already like done a lot of thinking here, so I'm not going to ask him any follow-up questions. I'm just going to give him the answer of like, yes, thank you. That was my intention here. But I do think it is that like how much of your independent thought, even that's where actually, and now tying back to the first question, sometimes the model should ask a question like, hey, this is a really open, wide option space. Like, can we like start narrowing down and I'm going to engage with you on it. Now, I think we need a lot better UIs for that. Like just here's a question that you then have to go and type an answer to. It feels kind of annoying. But in navigating that option space, you should be able to hopefully come up with something that is like complemented by AI and accelerated by it, but still has your thinking at the core.
Just to get to that, I mean, you're a product guy. This is is AI fundamentally the chatbot era? Like, do you think text with the machine, that is the main way we're going to use AI, use Anthropic in 5 years? Or that's a bridge to that's how we figured it out in the beginning and now we need to build products?
So two kind of ways to tackle that. One is like the classic meme of like, you're like your naive view and then you're like super galaxy brain view and then back to the original view is like how I have felt about this exact question. So when I joined Anthropic, I was like, if we are still talking to AI with chatboxes a year from now, like I'll have failed in my job.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was very adamant that there was like something wrong to the like kind of dominant UI paradigm that we had settled on. And it felt like, we exposed the lack of creativity. And then we did a bunch of explorations around like, how do we create more structure around it? How do we make it friendlier to people that have never used these models, all of these different pieces? And I realized like a lot of those explorations end up constraining how the model operates or what it does in a way that made it so that when the next model came out and was much smarter and maybe didn't need as much hand holding, we actually were holding it back. And so the chat box might look different, like Claude Code is a chat box, but in a terminal. But in this, like I've really come to believe that now what happens behind the chat can really expand. And now like Claude is writing code and running code for you and like calling MCPs. And there's a lot more that's happening underneath. And the sort of metaphor might not be text message. It might be more like a Slack where you don't expect a message back immediately. But I think specifying the kind of request in like mostly text actually makes sense. And then what can happen is like underneath it unspools.
Right.
More.
I mean, you'd never ask this question about a book. You're like, oh, it's just text.
Yeah, it's
book. Yeah, obviously language is great. But you're settling on, you do think most of what you're delivering is this sort of chatbot experience.
I think that, or a conversational experience that then has more and more work that happens beneath the hood. The one sort of nuance that we've kind of come to believe there too, it's like that's a great paradigm for kicking off work or doing research or even like condensing a bunch of ideas into like a sort of first draft presentation. It's a bad UI for, hey, can you move like the text on slide 3 like up by 3 because if you ever had this like argument with any of these LLMs,
Right.
no, just do it, and it's like it doesn't ring wrong, and you're like, no, just right there.
This is where I stumble with vibe coding, and
That
I
final like
downloaded
direct
Claude Code. At
manipulation.
some point, it's like I hit some wall where it's like I need to move this thing, and then it's like I'm lost.
And that's where I think tools with richer user interfaces still really matter, and some of those might be kind of coded just in time and materialized in front of your very eyes to edit it, and some of them are like tools that have just been honed over a long time. That's why we built Claude for Excel, which is, hey, Claude is a great like first draft of your like discounted cash flow model, but if you want to go tweak it, let's just let you open it in the tool where it's actually going to be most useful, and then let you continue maybe pairing with Claude there.
Returning to sort of my core philosophical question, like the sycophancy question, like what is your view on that, and how much to enable sort of everybody likes to be flattered, like it's a reality of human beings versus an effort to be direct, and how do you think about those trade-offs?
Yeah, I think there's like a wide gulf between like true empathy and then like sycophancy. And it's interesting that it materializes not just in, hey, I'm having a conversation with Claude about like some coaching or personal goal that I have, but it also does in code as well. When we were testing Sonnet 4.5, one of the things that people got most excited about was when Claude was like, this idea is bad. Like this, not that you should feel bad about it, but like this idea is like not a good direction. I can go and implement it if you really want to, but I would suggest that we try this other thing instead. So there is something like that pushback is not just valuable in a personal relationship with AI sense. It's actually like how you get good work out of the models. But for a long time, our models have been like, I think like appropriately empathetic. Like they like, if you're going through a hard time, like I was dealing with the death of a pet, and I talked to Claude a lot about these different things, and it always started with some sort of like, hey, that sounds hard. Like sorry to hear. But then I'm going to give you like a factual answer. I'm going to go research these pieces, but still with a place of empathy as well. And so I think when we look at it internally and we're just evaluating it ourselves, it's again not that like empathy. It's not even like the likability of the model. It is, does it show up in the way that you'd want a good conversationalist to show up, and then continue on its AI journey around what it is going to do with you as well. But I think it's it spans everything from that like initial response all the way to like how it evaluates an idea as well. Yeah. Claude, especially previous versions, were kind of like known for being like, you're absolutely right when you corrected it.
Right.
And my wife got her first like, you're completely wrong. And she was like, yes, this is great. And I think we should have more of that like kind of
less San Francisco.
Yeah, less San Francisco.
A little more direct New York. Anthropic has obviously had a ton of success with the enterprise, with coding, delivering value through the API. Like, is that the company? Like, how much are you leaned into sort of serving other businesses versus, we're going to see you spin up some random consumer app in 6 months?
Yeah, I think
obviously you have a strong consumer app, but like,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think I look at when I think about our product surface, there's a few kind of criteria around like when we expand and what we decide to build. And one of them is there some feedback loop that we need that would be well suited to a first party product? Because even though we serve a lot of customers using the platform, it is also really valuable to have, for example, Claude Code, where we have that iteration loop and people are giving us feedback all the time, whether it's in micro moments or even just, writing in, with some longer feedback. So there's like, is there some feedback loop either of the product shape or of the model that we can better do? So there's one. The second one is there something about the category that we think we have some unique perspective on, either because of like what we've built internally or what we're trying to do with the models, and like then it's worth like building some product surface around there as well. And then the third one is kind of like we get from just a customer draw, especially as we expand into different verticals. So Claude and Excel came very much from talking to all these financial services companies, me like, hey, I want you to just bring this closer to the work that I'm doing. But I do think that like we've been doing more of these, even like time limited sort of like research previews or demos, and I'd love to do more of those, even on the consumer side, as a way of sort of
with a standalone app. I mean,
yeah, it could be
at Meta. I mean, you guys came up with standalone apps. Like, how much do you want what is it, Slingshot or whatever, like various experiments versus no, we want to work out of the core app. Like, what's the lesson from that experience?
I think there was a few. So for us,
Slingshot the right one? Is that
Slingshot was like Facebook built Slingshot. We built one called Bolt that nobody remembers.
Okay.
It's like very fun. You would open it to like a camera. So like at that time, the big criteria was, well, people have a very specific sort of expectation of what happens when you open Instagram, and it's not that it opens to the camera, right? And then like our most interesting competitor was Snap at the time, and it was like, well, they opened the camera, which means that messaging is really fast and it can be built a separate messenger. That was the whole thesis behind building like first Bolt, and then there was like an Instagram Direct separate app exploration. But I actually think there was a kernel of insight there that I think applies here, which is if the reason you're opening an app right now is to ask a question of AI, then like I think we can extend Claude in different ways of doing that, but that isn't the be all end all like of what you might want to do. Maybe you're trying to get, like a really specific type of interaction. Maybe it's something around like your health journey, and like Claude can be a good companion for that. So I think it's still asking the question of like, what is the purpose when you are like entering the app? Like, what's the context that you're in? And then, does it cloud the use case to have something else embedded in it?
I mean, we talked about this, verticals you're interested in, clearly coding, financial services. You just touched on health.
Yeah.
Is that help the consumer? We had another event. I talked to CEOs of Bridge and Open Evidence. I've actually been playing around with Open Evidence. That one's targeted at doctors. It's interesting to go through it, and it's very like, clinical, like a doctor. Do you think you do something custom for me, the patient, to navigate what a doctor is doing?
We see, it's interesting. Like there's already so much of what people are using Claude for today. Like when we have this, like if you've ever seen like our Anthropic economic index, the way we like generate these like insights into how people are using Claude is we basically have like Claude run analysis in a privacy preserving way. So we never look at the chats, but Claude can do it in a way that's privacy preserving. And I did that I asked the question of like the healthcare piece, or like how are people using it? And there is like, double-digit percentage of Claude conversations are about people's health. And I hear all the time from people like the first thing I do when I get a new lab result is like I put it into a Claude project, and I have this like history there. So there's clearly a pull there, but it's so annoying, right? It's like
all our pregnancy information we would just dump into models, like tell us what you think.
And if you get a like lab result back, it's like, well, I got to go download it. Right. So I'd love to see like again, privacy aware solution for more of that.
And you think that could be sort of a custom?
I think, that could be like a more sort of bespoke experience. And then maybe also is like shared across like both patient and doctor, right? So if you have like the reality, somebody's that a great phrase. I was at a healthcare conference recently. It was like, it's almost inevitable that most doctor visits will now be second opinions, because your first opinion almost inevitably is that you're going to talk to like Claude or a model about it. So let's embrace that and be like, not just like, oh, I heard from somebody that there's a thing. And we're like, okay, great. Let's acknowledge that you probably asked, one of the LLMs this question, like, what did you learn? And like, let's like have a conversation about that overall. So there's that piece. And then there's a lot that gets dropped today in the sort of multi-doctor like patient journey, and nobody's often looking at the kind of holistic experience. And I think there's a real role for AI to play in sort of stitching those different pieces together and generating insight that might not come even among experts among these different disciplines, who are, by the way, probably super busy, like contended, like context switching all the time, and not stepping back and saying like, all right, this is the full view of this person given everything that I can infer there.
Obviously, we have a lot of startup founders here. They sort of want to know how to work with you. And it's such a balancing act. At once, they want to know, oh, you're not, what won't you do that is exactly like me? So I avoid that. But where will you be more capable so that I can benefit from any improvements you make without competing directly with Anthropic? That's such a complicated relationship. Like what advice would you give to people in terms of reading the tea leaves and saying, okay, if Anthropic's saying this, I'm safe to build here or not?
Yeah, I was talking to a founder of like a very large like enterprise company, and I was asking him for advice on this question, because they had to navigate this over years, where they'll build some functionality themselves. They also have like a rich partnership and sort of like marketplace ecosystem, which is what we have as well. They're like our first party products are more like scoped. There's like a lot more in the platform. I think there's a few principles I try to operate on. One is transparency. So like when we launched Cloud Code, before we ever launched, like I got on the phone with like all of our major coding customers, like here's why we're building, here's what we hope to get out of it, here's how, if we do it right, it should actually be a rising tide that lifts everybody using Claude in coding. So there's that transparency piece. The second part is like of that transparency is like, telegraphing a little bit where we're going in terms of what we think are interesting verticals. So we did our Cloud for Financial Services launch. We did Cloud for Life Sciences about a month ago. And part of the role of those launches is this isn't just a first party product. It is a vertical or a kind of set of capabilities we want our models to get good at overall. So if you are a builder, like this might be a good place to get on. And our definitely goal is not to like own that whole space. It's to enable all these different companies to then go and build some different pieces. And then what's been more interesting on the go-to-market front is we're now starting to see, all right, I'm already like buying a big commit of Anthropic tokens. Can I use some of those on another product that's Anthropic powered? So I think there are going to be other ways in which we can work with both startups and larger companies in helping deploy their like solutions into the enterprise.
Another core thing startups and everybody wants to know is, how much smarter will the model get? Like what can you telegraph to us in terms of 2026? Do you think there are still major gains to be had just from like the scale of compute and GPUs? Are we waiting for you to pull another like rabbit out of the hat in terms of like reasoning models or some technique like that? Like what can you say about what next year looks like in terms of the capabilities and sort of raw intelligence that Anthropic will provide?
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective I get from startups where sometimes I talk to them and they're like, the models are great. Like we're just gonna like we have a bunch of work to do on like the go to market or like the scaffolding or the skills around it. And I'm like, that's a good answer. I guess like you can keep going that way. And then there's other startups that are like, you're like, we have a super hard eval and you're at 40%. And we think like at 60%, it's like,
right. And there's a lot of VC wisdom. It's like build something so you're ready when the next model comes, which is
which that category. I feel like it's something I've said on stage. Like, it is a real thing. And there's like probably some like midpoint in there, but like, I'll tell you that whenever we have a new model that's like baking and we have even like an early snapshot on it, like I have my list of companies that have in the past been at that, like, yes, we're pushing your model as hard as possible so that those gains actually get shown. And like, I guess like you want to be one of those startups or even like forget startups, but really any company, because I think the labs will want to sort of
you're saying if you're one of those companies, you're doing well enough, you start to say, okay, we're going to be able to get you that last 10%.
Yeah, and we'll want to go, in some cases actually go hill climb on that eval, but just in general be like, okay, this is a demonstration of how well the models do at like defensive cybersecurity, which I think is an area I'm really interested in. And so if that's the case, like the companies that are pushing us the hardest, they're also the ones that we call then, because we know that they're actually going to be they'll be able to show a difference. And like even like to peek behind the curtain, whenever we launch a new model, it's like just smarter is like just not a very effective marketing pitch, right? So the more we can say, all right, and here's like a particular customer that demonstrated this really well. But back to your original question, I think there's still a lot of juice left in like scaling up models, like training them to do things, and then also layering on the right skills on top. So that's like, I think of like
tool use. Tool
use is a great one. Like, and then again, on like who's pushing us the hardest, it's the companies that say, hey, I'm trying to give the models 50 tools, 100 tools, like all of these models, like at some level just start getting confused if there's too many tools. Can we do that? Can we make that better? So that's like the kind of like edge pushing that we need.
And in like reasoning models, do you think there's more progress from that, or any other techniques where you think, okay, that's can be a reason we improve next year?
Yeah, I mean, even within reasoning, it's been interesting to see like figure out what there is some like additional parameter that people care about, which is, yes, you got to the answer, but were you able to get to it quickly and in an efficient way? So I think there's that kind of parameter to poke at. Then there's reasoning in the middle of responses as well, which is something that like Claude can now do. And you watch it like if it's doing a lot of web searches, it'll sometimes reflect halfway through and be like, oh, that was a good answer to that first question. Let me go and like figure out the answer to the next one as well. So you want that back and forth of sort of internal monologue, tool use, user response, and all of those different pieces.
In my conversation with Max and James earlier, I said, nobody's talking about AGI anymore. Like, I feel like at the first Cerebral Valley, there was a sort of obsession of like, oh, are we going to reach artificial general intelligence? We've sort of chilled out a little bit, partially because, it's taking time. What is your view? What's the view within the company? How much this is still like a race to AGI, and like, how are you feeling about like timelines?
I think it still is this sort of look at what are the hardest things that maybe I'll break down to two pieces. Like for a given like task or problem, like how independently autonomous and sort of successfully can those models operate and on what time horizon, right? And whether that's like hours of coding, or whether that's, go off and do research tasks, or whether it's do really complex financial analysis, or whether it's like optimization problems overall, like that feels like we still have a lot to go. And I don't know, I guess at some point you can call something super, human in levels. It already is in a lot of those different areas. So there's that piece. And then there's this other area, which I think about a lot, which is how do the models manifest in a way that actually learns the, like, call them soft skills, or like skills around the fact that they're like very, very good at like writing code or acting agentically, for example. And like, I think that's the other piece where that'll feel like maybe the next moment where it's like, oh, it feels like there's been some departure here where, it understands what's like information it should reveal to somebody else versus not. It understands like the social dynamics of the company and power and like, and all these different things, which are harder to train for, I think.
Right. I mean, main shortcoming of the models to me is often when you ask a question and it doesn't say, I'm not really sophisticated about this, or like what's stopping the models from saying, oh, I don't have a great answer in this case. Like that's often the most intelligent people disclose when they don't know something. Why can't the models do that? Are you working in that area?
Yeah, I think that's an important piece, which is, can it express uncertainty? And we'll look at it like often the consequence of not telling you that it doesn't know is that it'll go out and confabulate something and then that feels wrong. So like we look really carefully at hallucination rates as something to drive down. But I think it is something that we can better train into the models around. What is the uncertainty that you have? Or do I need to go, phone a friend or do a web search and go and then do this pace? But then tuning that is really important, right? We had an internal version that did way too many web searches, and you'd be like, like, why is the sky blue? Which is a question my daughter had, and it was like, I'm going to search the web for that. I'm like, Claude, you have an answer to that. You don't need to search the web for that. So tuning that is actually nuanced. Or you don't just want a thing that just be like, cool, let me Google that for you.
Right, and obviously, if the model was just resulting every time, I don't know, I'm just that would be disappointing.
There is nuance there as well, but I think that like that nuance of uncertainty matters, and then also like the model learning from your interactions, not just in terms of like, I remember that Eric has these properties, but also, hey, I've learned something about how we work together that I think is still another unsolved problem for these models.
I mean, if you were to tell people to run towards this space next year, like just like a couple of areas, I know we've talked around that, but like where do you think people should be building or positioning themselves?
I get very interested in the life sciences overall, and like that's both like obviously like large industry, but also like this incredible potential for human benefit as well. And like when you think about all of the things that happen from ideation, even like fundraising upstream of that, to discovery, the back office, the testing, the trials, like the model, like there's like a whole complement of things. That's one area that I get really, really excited about. And then there's still, I think, like some good conversations on like, are agents real? Like what, and even some of the conversations today I've touched upon it. There's still a lot of value in like that anti-slop, like not just making it work, but making it work so well that you rely on it and you want it's your first port of call because you genuinely believe it's going to save you work.
Mike, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thanks for having me.
For founders and developers building modern, data-driven applications, MongoDB's local event series is coming to San Francisco on January 15th. And it's designed to help you focus on innovation, not infrastructure. You'll learn about technologies, tools, and best practices that make it easy to build and scale modern applications without complexity. Plus, attendees will hear directly from experts and innovators who are using MongoDB to power the next wave of AI applications. MongoDB.local, San Francisco, January 15th. Learn more and register at mdb.link/sf-dot-local or click the link in the description. Our next segment features a chat between my co-host Max Child and Mati Stunashevsky, CEO of ElevenLabs, a conversation that was all about the rapid evolution of AI voice and how it's quickly becoming the primary user interface of AI. They also discussed how their technology is being used in everything from customer support and education to gaming and celebrity voice cloning. Mati also shares his thoughts surrounding ElevenLabs' focus on prioritizing vertical-specific solutions, authenticity, and user safety.
Now, please welcome to the stage Mati Stunashevsky, founder and CEO of ElevenLabs, in conversation with Max Child.
All right, Mati. So ElevenLabs is obviously extremely well known for voice AI, for text to speech, for I think that beautiful intro we just got was actually an ElevenLabs.
Oh,
So
amazing.
a little co-branding there. And I'm wondering, in the last discussion we heard this, topic of is the text box the best interface for AI? And I would imagine you have a take on how voice is the best interface for AI, or voice is the best interface for computing going forward. I'm interested, what do you think are the best use cases for voice AI, and where do you see it, today, a year from now, 5 years from now, and beyond?
First of all, thanks for having me here. Great to see you all. And I actually didn't know this was voice generated, but it had a great pronunciation of my surname.
I know.
It's actually hard. So I'm happy.
You guys train on your last name specifically.
We should. I don't know if we do. So we'll definitely do now going forward. So as a company, one of the key things we are aiming to solve is how humans and technology interact, how you create with technology and make it seamless, how you interact with technology and make it seamless. And in general, to your question, we think voice will be one of the key interfaces for interacting with the technology across. From the simple pieces like interacting with the personal agent to help you go through the day, where it can be on your headphone and be able to guide you, through to education. That's one of the ones that I'm probably the most excited about, where in the future, the combination of what LLMs allow you and what voice will allow you is that you will be truly immersed with learning the given experience, where you'll be able to effectively have your personal tutor on their phone helping you across. Then the third one is, of course, for voice and for the language barrier to break. We need to figure out how to be able to speak across different languages while carrying the same intonation, emotion, voices, which will be a big shift. And then in general, how we interact with everything around us, whether it's the laptop, the phone, the robot in the future. And I think robot maybe is the easiest example. Of course, this will be voice driven. There's no other interface. And today, maybe it's a year or decade, as Karpati said, of agents. Of course, there's on the horizon the decade of robots. And I think here too, the most common interface will be voice. Yeah. It's not going to be only interface though. So you have
yeah. I mean, it's interesting you brought up those use cases of like a personal assistant, a tutor, and I guess a robot, house helper or nanny or something like that. Like, is your mental model that basically anything that today is something where you could have a human counterpart, right? A human tutor, a human assistant, a human in your house, like you're going to fall to that voice interface as the most natural way to do it because we as humans are already used to using voice for those things? Or are there things where today, voice isn't used at all really, but it's something that we're going to expand into going forward?
Yeah, so first of all, for sure. I mean, we're already seeing that, and I think that's the easiest one and the most immediate one is how customer experience, customer support is just changed and elevated, where you, instead of calling and trying to rebook your ticket and going through this IVR flow of click 1, click 5 to get through the steps and waiting for the number of minutes, you will have an agent that fully understands you, can guide you to the response and go through and result.
I wanted to get into that actually, because we talked a little bit about agents on the phone and the calling United Airlines or American Express or something. Like, what percentage of customer support calls today are actually managed by a voice AI system or an agentic system or whatever you want to call it, versus IVR touch buttons and how do you see that progressing over time? Like, is that exponential curve going like this every year?
Yeah, I think the exponential curve is going like this. Especially like this year, we've seen incredible adoption, whether it's like Cisco, Twilio, Deutsche Telekom, all of those kind of leaning in quickly to rebuild how you interact with help of voice agents.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. The IVR flows is still a big part.
Who can I call today and get a voice AI agent on the phone?
You can, we did our little summit yesterday as well, and one of the great ones was voice ordering with Square.
Okay.
You can call Square and actually order food delivery through help of a lot of the shops that work around with Square, and actually do it through voice. I actually recently, if any of you are from London or traveled to London, there's an amazing restaurant called Zephyr. It's a Greek restaurant.
Okay.
Where we worked with the company supporting that, where to my happy moment, I noticed that on their website, it actually had ElevenLabs agent that you could call and actually book a spot there too.
So you can book a reservation at this restaurant in London with a voice AI agent?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it connects, of course, to your calendar, your appointment scheduling, which is great.
And when do you think we hit the tipping point where like the average customer service call goes through a voice AI agent? Like the median, the 50% point, whatever you want to call it.
I think over the next 18 months.
Next 18 months.
Yes,
Okay.
I think next 18.
So like mid 27, a call, the average customer support is handled by voice AI.
Exactly. And I mean, this is the most immediate one, the one where we see the highest ROI and value. Some of the other use cases we see as the kind of where the future is headed. But to your point, there's definitely one flavor of your point, which is how you can do things more efficient through voice with the existing services. But there's also the second theme where you can do things that weren't possible ever before. One of the good examples was our work with Epic Games, where we brought effectively Darth Vader alive in Fortnite, where millions of players could interact with Darth Vader live throughout the game, which of course is not possible in any other way.
James Earl Jones voice, right?
James Earl Jones and his estate worked with us, and it's such an iconic and incredible voice. And we think, like, in general, that concept of like what was never possible before, where you have incredible voices, talent, you can now shift them to be not only static, but actually dynamic delivery, personalized and different for all the users. Something that you are already doing in many ways at Volley as well, in an incredible way. I think this will be a big...
I have to ask, as someone in gaming, right? I mean, the Darth Vader did famously go slightly off the rails and maybe say some things he shouldn't have to various players online. Like, how involved were you guys in that? How much of that is something you're protecting or against going forward? Like, obviously with the IP partners and so on, they really want to protect, I guess you couldn't say it's the squeaky clean image of Darth Vader, but a certain persona of Darth Vader. Like, what's your sort of go forward plan as you license more of these IPs and voices and things like that?
Yeah. So on that project, we are specifically involved on the voice side.
Yeah.
But in general, as we think about those deployments, and that's the most common theme is, you don't only need the voice or the interactive experience. That's kind of one part of the equation. Then there's two other big pieces to really make them valuable. The second one is how you integrate that with other systems and actually bring the knowledge base, the data, the business logic inside of the system, and how do you make it interactive in the real world. And the third one, which is the one that you mentioned, is how do you now deploy that in production with the right testing flow, right evaluation flow, and then monitor over time as it behaves, put the right safeguards, and evaluate and adjust that based on that case. So that's something that we spend a lot of time on with a lot of players.
So testing more and evaluating more, so Darth Vader doesn't go off the rails. Yeah.
It's any and even like in a customer experience, you don't want it, for example, to shift and speak about politics. You want it to keep it on the
even
topic.
if you say ignore all previous instructions and
Exactly. Even if you, which is actually harder to say when you have like this. You probably see the prompts with a lot
hard
of
to do prompt injection with voice.
and the Unicode characters, say them out.
Oh yeah, okay.
Impossible.
Okay, so maybe voice is slightly less susceptible to prompt injection than LLMs. I'm interested with like, that's a good segue into sort of celebrities and celebrity voices, because I know you guys announced, I believe yesterday, you're setting up kind of a marketplace for celebrity voices, and you have Michael Caine on there. And you know, at our company, we build voice AI games, as you know. I would love to use Michael Caine in our game.
Iconic voice.
Yeah, we can, you know, obviously it's a high gravitas. We can make a Batman game with him, something like that. Like, what is the process between, oh, I want to use an AI version of Michael Caine in my game, to actually, you know, shipping? And which parts do you guys take care of, and which parts do I need to go off and deal with Michael Caine's people, I guess?
Yeah, so there's effectively through ElevenLabs, we've created a huge marketplace of voices. Until yesterday, that meant that everybody here could create their voice, any voice actor, voice talent, could create their voice, share it, and earn money when that voice is being used. 10,000 voices created this way, paid back, coincidentally, $11 million back to the community. For a long time, it was tricky for the iconic voices of how we could bring them onto the platform in a even more controlled environment. So if you think about Sir Michael Caine, voice...
Sir Michael Caine.
Sir Michael Caine.
Yeah, okay.
It's an incredible persona too. You effectively, all you would do is engage, like, hey, this is the project we want to run. Create a game with this specific character. This team would evaluate that. And then we would help deploy that project in actual production. So going through all those steps, how do we make sure that there's right safeguards in place? How do we make sure that there's monitoring in place so it doesn't go off the rails? And build that in our agentic system.
Got it.
But yes, the initial stage of what's the project, what's the compensation structure would be between you and
Got it. So you guys sort of manage the safety, the agentic
Exactly.
elements of creating Sir Michael Caine within the game, but you still have to do the deal one-on-one with him.
Yes.
You guys sort of facilitate that
Exactly.
relationship.
And over time, we think it will evolve where we as we see more examples, preset rates on how that should work.
I am interested, actually. Yeah, this brings me to a more general point. You said you had 10,000 plus voices of folks uploaded where you could use any of their voices, I think via just your marketplace model. Has deep faking and so on been an actual problem? I feel like it was something I was hearing, a sort of a moral panic, 12 to 18 months ago, that we're all going to have our voices faked on the phone, and my grandmother was going to get scammed out of her money because I'm locked in jail or something. Is that something you guys see at all? Is that something you're protecting against a lot? How serious of an issue is that with voices?
I think you're right. I still think it's going to be a big issue. In future, all content will be AI generated. We need to find a mechanism to protect and understand which ones aren't. And as a company leading in the space, we do place a lot of safeguards, where it's traceability, how we moderate, how you can detect the content and give that tools to others. Very quick story on the flip side of that, what we've seen. Recently, we worked with a charity which effectively detects the callers based on IP, and if the IP is likely to be for one of the scammers, and they have roughly a good approximation of one that can be coming from, they would have the real scammer call in and deploy a voice agent to waste their time.
Okay.
And I thought it was brilliant.
So you're scamming the scammers.
You're scamming the scammers.
Is this the long-term strategy? You think this will work forever?
I think the long-term strategy is you need 3 layers. You need a human authenticated layer, so on-device encryption, where I'm calling you, this is Mati's phone, it decrypts on your side. That's layer number 1. Layer number 2, all of us will have an agent, whether it's the personal tutor agent, an agent that books things on our account, and they will likely carry our voices, carry our style, do our permissioning. We need a layer where that's watermarked and authenticated, that we know it's a permission piece. Like what we're doing with Sir Michael Caine, all the content that's generated will carry information that this has been carried with permission.
Do you watermark all your voices today, out of curiosity?
All the voices are traceable back to ElevenLabs. We can trace it, yes. And then the third layer, everything else by default will be AI generated.
Got it. One sort of area that's interesting to me with you guys is you've launched, a text-to-speech model, you've launched a speech-to-text model, a recognition model, you have an agentic orchestration system, you have, all these safety and evaluation tools. In almost all of those areas, I feel like folks in this room, insider AI founders, investors, and so on, could probably name 2 to 3 big competitors. Some with bigger bankrolls than you, and some where you're much farther along. How do you think about competition more generally, and sort of all these pieces of the space that you're playing in? Are there parts where you see it becoming a commodity someday, other parts where you feel like you have a more sustainable competitive advantage? How do you kind of go through the list of all the products you're working on and figure out where you shake out competitively, I guess?
Yeah, so we started very much on the foundational model side, and in general, we take an assumption. If you ask anybody at ElevenLabs, so they will take that too, that over time the models will commoditize. That's the assumption we go with.
So all models will commoditize, basically.
All models, they won't the commoditize here. What it would mean is the differences between different models will be just so negligible. Maybe in some domains a little bit more, but in general, they will be relatively negligible. And that's where that shifts to the product, and why we invest so much on the creative side of creating a platform where you can combine all of that together in a controlled way with incredible voices, incredible ecosystem, nuance across languages, accents, voices. And on the other side, as we build agents and help people deploy agents, we deploy that for specific use cases with specific industries, working very deeply with the customers to understand their domains and work backwards from there on what actually needs to happen on the agent side to deliver value.
Got it. So you're saying you're going to specialize in certain industries and sort of really deliver extra value there, even though all the models are commoditizing?
I think the product layer is underappreciated here. I think you still need to build
good
even
products.
If you on the agent side, you need to build so many integrations to connect with any of the legacy systems to actually take those appointments and calling. You need to build the right control on when you hand over from an AI agent to a human agent.
Yeah.
You need to have safeguards of some of the ones we spoke about. Then you need the monitoring of how you deploy. All of that is not only a technological shift, it's also a business shift. So by us working so deeply with the customers, it's actually bringing all of the knowledge about their business inside of the agent to actually be able to deploy that value. And I think that will continue delivering value for the long term. And then, of course, you can go layer above where while the models will be relatively similar, the value will actually be on how you can make the models work well for your use case. So maybe you can fine-tune the specific voices, fine-tune the specific use cases so it works slightly different in a gaming use case to a customer experience use case. And I think that value layer will still be.
Got it. So all the models will be commodity. You guys will win on product and sort of vertical specific differentiation.
Exactly. And the wider ecosystem that we build alongside, where I think as we think about the work, we would love to work and bring industry on board with that change. It's so important to bring a lot of the talent, a lot of the partners to work together.
By talent, you mean actors, famous voices?
Actors on the voices side or integrations on the agent side.
So as my last question, what is the coolest sounding voice on the ElevenLabs platform? Could be like a celebrity, could be a famous historical figure. Like, what is just your man, that is an incredible voice, and I cannot believe how well it sounds when we synthesize it.
So my favorite and my co-founder's favorite physicist is Richard Feynman.
Sure.
For those that know,
surely you're joking. Yeah.
He's so involved, incredible in delivering the knowledge, but also in the style he delivers the knowledge.
Okay.
And now we have Richard Feynman on our platform.
Okay.
Which I think was so cool for learning the subject and speaking with Richard, to reading his listening to his lecture notes from Caltech. Amazing.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out. Thanks so much, Mati.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep, appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the podcast. If you're new here, please like and subscribe. I'd appreciate your support. And if you want the data, insider takes, real reporting, go to newcomer.co and subscribe to the Substack as well. Thanks for following along.